everybody, and welcome back to another devlog for ModMask, a VR action game I'm solo developing. If you've already been following this devlog series, you may have noticed that this has been the longest break between devlog releases. This is not a coincidence, and I believe you should expect this to start to becoming the norm. As I get deeper into the project, the development and design tasks are going to start to become more complex and will require more time to complete. I don't want to force out devlogs and sacrifice the quality of the solutions and features. I believe this devlog series is essential to making this game the best version of itself that I can for when it comes time to do an actual release. But I just want to make sure that those who have been following know that if the gaps between devlog releases get a bit longer, then the project is not dead. Far from it. If you are interested in staying up to date on the development status of this game on a week-by-week basis, then make sure you join my Discord server where I post updates on the game leading up to these devlogs. Joining the Discord is also a way you can get a chance to get early access to the game, as I recently just gave out a tech demo to select Discord members who gave some really valuable feedback as well as finding some bugs. Some of those bugs I did already know about, but some I did not. So regardless, I can already tell that this experience is going to be a net positive for this game. As I continue down the development path of this game, I'm going to be doing a mix of continuing to build the foundation of the systems, as well as address some of the bugs that were reported on these hand-on sessions, as those are the most noticeable issues players encounter as they first experience the game. Once I have enough of that addressed, I will be doing another hands-on community tech test, so make sure to join the Discord server if you want to get early access to the game, link in the description. When it comes to the foundation of the game, I want to start working on proper level design soon, not just in terms of layout, but also with art assets as well. I think I'm going to start with some serious attempts at making maps for the endless wave battle mode, using assets that could also be used in the campaign mode, but there's one key thing I noticed about my enemy AI is making it difficult to test proper levels. And that is the fact that they only shoot their projectile attacks parallel to the ground. So far, all my sandbox areas have been flat, one-story rooms. So as soon as I added the water section, I noticed that mass enemies couldn't attack me because I was lower than the ground. To address this, I made a room more specifically designed for developing this solution. Not only do I want the enemies to be able to shoot down at me if I'm on a lower level, but I also want them to be able to shoot up to me at a higher level. This room was created to help me test both of those scenarios. Now that I've done angled shooting, this will allow me to start creating more complex level designs and get somewhat of a more proper idea of how they feel. That is an example of a feature that I wanted to do. The Discord testers did not notice that if you jump in the water, that none of the enemies were able to attack you and you were basically invincible. But I do also need to address the issues that they encountered, and I thought we should get one of the biggest ones, in my mind, out of the way. When you reach behind your shoulder, you draw out a sword. The reported bug is that you can keep drawing swords and there's no end to it. This is something I've always known about. It's easy to hide that in these devlog videos, but the fix to this is something that I've been stuck on for a long time now. This bug may seem simple, but in the grand design of the game, it's actually much more complicated. Recently, I've been playing some Bone Lab, which you can check out my first impressions video. One aspect about the game I realized is that it reaffirms that I just don't like the current state of inventory systems in VR. I put a lot of thought into that aspect when it comes to drawing the sword in my game. I was really happy when the Discord member said drawing the sword felt really good. What I really dislike in VR games is when I'm trying to perform over-the-shoulder inventory, but it doesn't work on the first try. It's annoying when you have to do multiple attempts at storing or retrieving your weapon. So I solved the retrieving problem in my game, but there's still the storing of the weapon. And this is where I run into two very different scenarios. One, the player properly puts away the sword. This should be a no-brainer, as is just the drawing of the sword logic, but in reverse. Or two, the player drops the sword and never picks it back up. See, this is virtual reality. I don't want the sword to be stuck attached to the player's hand. If they drop it during combat, I want them to have to be forced to pick it back up to continue fighting. This should hopefully create tension if up against multiple enemies, but the player does not have a mass power and their only option is the sword. But if the player is allowed to drop the sword, what if they don't pick it back up? Or they get it stuck or dropped somewhere where they can't retrieve it? Is the game now broken? Since the player didn't put it away, is the sword gone forever? This is supposed to be the character's main default weapon, a backup for when they don't have a mass power. So what do we do? It took me a while to come up with the overall design of this, but if I'm going to fix this infinite sword spawning problem, I want to do it in a way that brings this game closer to release status. In other words, I want to do it the right way. The big picture of this design is probably going to span over the next couple of devlogs, as there's a lot to do here all at once. So this devlog is going to end partway through it, as to allow for feedback to get submitted that can help influence if I need to pivot on any of these design choices. But either way, I have a clear vision of all the systems I need and how they will interact with each other. Enough of a vision to be able able to move forward with it. Part of the design solution is actually going to rely on the story of the game and who the character is. The main character you play as is going to be an android. The world takes place in a future where there are no more fully organic intelligent life forms. All intelligent life is at least partially synthetic. It is common practice under large governments for these synthetic components to be largely regulated to suppress the power ceilings of individuals and thus keep order. Mod masks are illegal methods of hacking into one's synthetic components to override them and perform actions outside of government regulation, hence the elemental powers. That's enough story reveal for now. But essentially, since you are already an android and are part machine, the suit you are wearing is designed to produce combat swords. So what I plan on doing is if you drop your sword, if it goes for say 60 seconds without the player picking it back up, it'll get destroyed. But after you draw your sword, a cooldown timer starts where your suit is busy creating the next usable sword for you to use. I hope this creates a balance where when in heavy combat situations, the player feels value in holding onto their sword, but can also come up with combat strategies where they can drop the sword for a little while, but still pick it back up, throw a sword at their enemies, and not have to worry about being without a sword for the whole combat scenario, etc. I've mentioned cooldowns before as well with the elemental powers in general. Right now you can shoot projectiles endlessly with no negative downside. But how are these cooldowns going to be communicated to the player? Well, I've always had it in my head that this is what this UI space is for. Using a mix of Unity assets, Open Game Art assets, and Photoshop, I came up with this design for the heads-up display, or HUD UI. Design-wise, I think this covers all the essentials I'm looking for and fills up the empty space nicely. First off, this UI is not representative of how strong the player will be at the beginning of the game, but rather at the end once they have obtained all the skill points available in the game and upgraded their stats to the max. As you can see, we have 4 main sections in the HUD UI: the health bar, shield bar, mask power, and available sword count. In Photoshop, it is important that I made each and every piece of this image into its own layer so I can manipulate it in the game engine with code. Using the health bar as an example, each little health pellet is its own layer. I exported each combination for all 16 variations of the health bar status, and instead of displaying numbers like 80 or 90 for the health, it now shows 8 or 9 health bars. I'm doing this by displaying the appropriate image based on the player's numeric health value, and when I take some painkillers, you can see that I get health back. As I mentioned earlier in this video, I do not have all the back-end logic done for all of these elements, and there's functionality to get this HUD to truly work properly that will need to be addressed on the wrist UI, which is coming in a future devlog. So for now, the shield bar is not operational, and the icon may not be finalized as well, but there will be some shield-esque mechanic on the way. As for the swords, I do not at this time have the swords destroying themselves after an extended period of time of not being used, but I do have the sword counters in place and working similar to the health bar in terms of icon swapping. At max skill level, the player will be allowed to draw out 3 swords before being stopped by the cooldown. This is so players can dual wield swords, but also be able to have a sword throw attack as well that can be utilized. I feel like this is a nice balance of being restrictive enough to not be overpowered, but still fun to play. Before I can truly finish the sword icon portion, I needed to figure out how I would communicate the cooldown. I feel like a simple cooldown timer would work, but since the sword icons move a bit more dynamically, I thought it'd be easier to start working on the cooldown display with the mask power icon, as I already have the cooldown backend logic complete for the mask power attacks. Well, first, we of course need to have the correct mask power icon showing for the mask the player has equipped. When putting on masks, the mask power icon shows the appropriate power the player has equipped and also changes the color palette of the HUD. Lastly, for this devlog, I added the cooldown timer to the mask power to see how it would look like. There are still issues with all the elements on the HUD, but like I mentioned before, some of their behaviors are not going to be complete until I create more of the menus that will be featured on the wrist UI. But I thought this would be a good place to take a break from the development of these features and cut a devlog as a way to try to collect some feedback. Do you like the new HUD and features? If so, what is your favorite part about it? Or is there anything you would like to see changed or improved? As I continue to develop this based on my vision, I am listening to the feedback, and so far I feel like it has only helped me improve the design of the game. So please let me know your thoughts down in the comments, as it is truly helpful. And also be sure to join the Discord server if you'd like to have even more of an impact on the development of this game. Or of course, you can always subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. I still plan on pushing out weekly videos, but there was a pattern for a bit of 3 non-devlog videos in between every devlog video, and I just want to say don't expect that pace to be the norm anymore, as some things are just going to start to take a bit longer development-wise. Luckily, as we enter holiday 2022 and early 2023, there's going to be plenty of exciting VR news on the way, so make sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of that. If you made it this far in the video, then thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.